and begin. So, a very warm welcome to everyone to the webinar. My name is Sakshi, and I am an associate working with Space to Grow. And today I'm the moderator for all of you. I'll be guiding you through the webinar, introducing our speakers, managing the Q&A session with Chitra, and ensure that, of course, all of us are on schedule. And we're very thrilled to have all of you, all the participants and the speakers to join with us for this webinar on the Safer Internet Day, especially where discussions are happening worldwide, and we are also joined together for discussing on a very crucial topic that is impacting children worldwide. So, I would request all the participants to also use the chat box for posting questions and having thoughtful discussions. And I'll request everyone to please be relevant to the topic. And after that, I hope that all of you, like me, are excited to hear from the panelists on the different tracks that we have scheduled for today. And now we'll begin and have hear from Chitra, the opening remarks. Chitra is the co-founder and CEO of Space to Grow. Over to you, Chitra.
A very, very good afternoon and a warm welcome to each one of you for this discussion today. Um, what I have to say today is one really important thing. Thank you so much to all the esteemed speakers and the participants uh, for joining in today on a very important day, which is the Safer Internet Day. We at Space to Grow, along with ICMEC, are here to host this discussion on AI driven digital risks for children. What we are trying to understand during this webinar is what are the changing trends, what are the global best practices, and the ways to mitigate harm. And what better, today is the Safer Internet Day. So, thank you so much, each one of you, for joining us. It definitely will sound like a cliche if I say it isn't another webinar. But I have to say, yes, it isn't another webinar, as this is a very, very critical conversation about safety and well being of children in an increasingly AI driven world. None of us here, I'm sure, have any aversion to technology. And it's the role that it plays in the development. But yes, all of us strongly stand for ensuring that technology isn't harming children and their well-being. And of course, the safety of everyone who is using platforms. We at Space to Grow are delighted that we are partnering with ICMEC on this vital initiative. Their global expertise and unwavering commitment to child protection, along with our own in-depth understanding of digital safety landscape for children in India, brings unparalleled value to our discussion today. I extend a warm welcome to each of the esteemed speakers who have accepted to be here and share their valuable insights and expertise as we navigate this very complex landscape. Why is this webinar different? Because we are not just talking about abstract risks, these are risks that we know are happening and we are confronting it on a daily basis. It's a reality that is already impacting children across the globe. We at Space to Grow are also doing a small, focused research on AI and emerging threats through secondary research, and some of the case studies that we have been seeing is what I'm going to share today. One of the case studies is a basic incident that's happened in Australia, where in a school, teenagers weaponized readily available AI, creating nude images of 50 female classmates from their social media. And these AI generated images were then spread across platforms like Instagram and Discord, causing immense reputational and psychological harm to these young girls. There is another case study that has recently happened in India where there is digital violation at a school in Bangalore. In Bangalore, in India, we saw another deeply troubling instance. Two 15-year-old girls became the target when classmates used a school Instagram group to share inappropriate AI generated images of them. This case highlights the alarming intersection of AI, cyberbullying, and CSAM within schools. A very similar incident in the US, AI generated CSAM scandal at US school. It was a CSAM that was generated with a pattern which was horrifying, familiar AI generated images of female students of the same class, which got circulated through peers via Discord. And all these incidences have been reported in the media and have been reported in terms of cases, and all of this is happening in the last 2 years. Now, let's pause for a moment and truly consider what we have shared and what I have just spoken about. All these three cases are unfolding in different parts of the world, very similar trends, and there is definite cause of harm that is happening to children by these AI generated images. These are different cultural contexts. These are underlying pattern is very very identical. So this is not just a mere discussion that we're having. We're trying to understand that, okay, if this is a global phenomena, if this is something that's happening across the globe, it is one moment right now when we're having these esteemed experts to speak as to how do we share about these instances which are happening, what are the evolving trends, what are the emerging threats, how do we collaborate at a macro level to be able to combat harms against children which is AI driven. So thank you so much for joining today. And our aim today to through this discussion is to deepen our understanding on these trends, learn from global best practices, and also identify concrete and actionable ways to mitigate these risks. So thank you so much for joining in, and I'm hopeful to have a great discussion and a clear plan forward of how we can collaborate together. So thank you so much for joining in. Over to you, Sakshi.
Thank you, Chitra, for your opening remarks and welcoming everyone, and for highlighting the realities that we face right now. Now, to further set the context for our discussion and share perspectives on these global challenges that Chitra just shed light on, I would like to invite Pilar Ramirez, Vice President of National Capacity Building at the International Center for Missing Children. She's a legal expert with 21 years of experience in human rights, child protection, and technology policy. At ICMEC, she leads national capacity building efforts, developing strategic partnerships and programs focused on child safety in the digital age. Over to Pilar.
Thank you so much and welcome everyone. So, good afternoon in India. And Shitra, thank you so much for this partnership. When you started talking with us for the International Center for Missing and Exploited Children, we see like a huge opportunity for continue working together for doing some important work in India. I need to say for everyone that we start working in India 20 years ago when, like the internet was the first event that exists in the world and was like it's new for everyone. But, 20 years ago, it's like a lot of time. And we see how these things are changing and how the people, the children and the aggressor are using the internet not only for doing the bad things, but a lot of things. So for give a better context about what we are here today, as you know, in all the world today, we are celebrating the Safety on Internet Day. But what and why we are celebrating the day? In 2004, in Europe, a group of experts started talking about that importance for have a specific day for talk about that important topics that are happening in the internet. So, like these good practices start to grow. And now I can say like more than 180 countries, we are together today talking about the internet. When we talk about the internet, we need to think the first thing is like the positive things. We are now together talking about the internet. Thanks for the internet. We communicate each other's. Thanks for the internet. We find a lot of information. Thanks for the internet. But in the same way, we need to understand that we need to have a responsibility for the use in the correct use for the internet. I think that one of the key points here is like we are here because we really want to protect our children, adolescent and children. That is our priority. We work specifically to protect them. And should I say something important? Internet is a global things that obviously is not only India. When we talk about victims, we need to understand that maybe the victim is in India, but the aggressor is in another country. So we can to work together, all the countries, for trying to find solutions. But when we talk about the solutions, I am not saying that it's like a government responsibility. The first responsibility is in home. What we are doing for trying to teach for teach our children, for teach ourselves about what we need to do in internet and what is the new trends that are existing. Chitra says something important about that these things that is happening around the world, artificial intelligence. Yes, that is something that is happening not now. This is something that started a couple years ago, but now we are seeing the effect, the danger effect that is causing for something that is against our children. But we need to talk about that the grooming, we need to talk about that the cyberbullying, we need to talk about that the child sexual abuse materials generated for the adolescents. So the education is starting home, but what happened if we don't teach, for example, the schools, the professors? What happens if we don't work not only with the government, we need to work with the internet service providers, with this huge industry that support us for try to create some specifically tools for try to avoid all the things that is happening in internet. I think that the most important about that the Safer Internet Day is like that create the awareness, not only in us, that create the awareness in all the people that use the internet for the good way for the use the internet. I know that this webinar, in this webinar, you will know about what is happening, what is the trends that is important, but I am excited about that the panelists, about that the speakers, because they are a huge speakers that have a lot of experience, not only in India, in all the world. And you will understand how we can to work together for fight against online child sexual abuse and exploitation. But the most important, what we can do for try to engage all the people, for try to join us for fight against that kind of crimes. You need to understand that obviously cyberbullying, grooming, and all this kind of crime exists, but we have a new trends. For example, the fake news that affect a lot the population, the misunderstanding news that is, like it's affecting not only, I am saying, the children and adolescents, a lot of us. A lot of times when we see this fake news affect our children too, because they really believe that everything that is in internet is true. And we need to teach our children that not everything that they find in internet is the real. It's real and it's the reality about that what is happening around the world. So it's a big challenge for all of us. And I think that one of the key points for everyone that is in this webinar is continue having these connections with another NGOs, with another countries for work together, for improve the way that everyone is using and seeing the internet. So thank you so much. I hope that this webinar, you enjoyed this webinar, that you learn a lot this webinar. And please, if you need something, if you want to talk more and discuss a little more about that, what we can do for protect our children in internet, you come for the International Center for Missing and Exploited Children, and obviously with the Space to Grow in India. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Pilar, for your words. I totally agree with you that the action time is to collaborate, because the harms are not just affecting children in India, but it's also affecting everyone globally. So thank you so much for setting the context. Now we will begin with our speaker sessions. And to start with track one, on the evolving trends of AI-induced digital harms on children. We want to shed light on how AI is being misused to exploit young users. And to lead this discussion, we have Emma Person, project coordinator at the Center for Artificial Intelligence and Robotics, UNICRI, United Nations. She leads the AI for Safer Children initiative, which leverages AI's positive potential to strengthen law enforcement capacities worldwide through an online platform and specialized training. Her work at the center focuses on responsible AI innovation and its risk within criminal justice systems and international sphere. Building on her academic background in international peace and security, public international law, and emerging technologies. I look forward to hearing from Emma on the ways now children are exploited by using AI. And over to you, Emma.
Thank you very much for that introduction. Like you said, my name is Emma, and it's my pleasure to be here on behalf of the United Nations Interregional Crime and Justice Research Institute, that I will now call UNICRI. And firstly, I'd like to thank ICMIC and Space to Grow for inviting us and organizing this event on the timely day of Safer Internet Day. So thank you very much for that. It's a very important topic. And my presentation will cover emerging AI trends related to child sexual abuse and exploitation that we have seen through our projects on this specific crime type. So specifically, I'm drawing from this report that our UniCRE Center produced alongside Brackett Foundation and Value for Good. And we produced this report as a research output as part of our broader AI for Safer Children initiative, which you mentioned. That's the project I'm coordinating. However, this one is actually focused on AI solutions. So I'm mainly drawing from the outputs in this report, and I'll put the QR code up again at the end of this presentation. I'm just letting you know where to find more in-depth coverage of this topic if you're interested. So I'll start by noting that the issue of child sexual exploitation and abuse is not new. It was already envisioned in the Convention of the Rights of the Child way back in 1990. However, certain AI systems, and particularly generative AI, have played a key role in increasing the magnitude and severity of this crime to become one of the world's fastest growing major crimes. So you can see on the right a graph from the Internet Watch Foundation, or IWF, that shows an increasing amount of AI material in their reports over the course of 1 year. Now, while the proportion of AI-generated child sexual abuse material is still small, it is a huge concern for practitioners due to the rapid development and adoption of AI technology. And also keep in mind that image generating AI models were only launched in 2023. So this data that we're seeing is just beginning. This slide provides an overview of 4 trends that I will touch on in the course of this presentation. The first is AI generated child sexual abuse material, both images and videos. Videos are a newer phenomenon, but the same principles apply. Then I'll cover AI-generated text, such as chatbots, which can encourage and normalize harmful behavior of offenders. And then I'll also mention improved AI technology, which means better, faster, and more accessible tools to generate this illegal material. And I'll also touch on Nudify apps, which Chitra mentioned, have become a huge issue. And these are also linked to lowering the barriers to entry since apps are so easy to access for anyone. And I also link this to Sextortion, which is not AI per se, but I'll explain the connection on that slide. So to jump into the first trend, AI-generated child sexual abuse material is one of the most worrying recent trends in this field, both given the scale and the speed at which it can be created. So this causes issues, for instance, for investigators who are already overburdened. It increases their workload of images to examine exponentially. Imagine at the press of a button, you could just generate tens or hundreds of images, just one person. And the investigators don't even know if they're searching for a real victim in need of rescuing, or even a real location or a real act, because any part of the image may be generated. And needless to say, this significantly hinders the safeguarding of real victims. It also enables new ways of victimizing people. As you can see here, this is a graph from the generative AI report. You can have children whose normal images have been used to train AI models, so their likenesses are already there. Or you might have children whose normal images are transformed into child abuse material with AI, even if they're not being physically abused. And then you have existing victims who are being physically abused, who have been re-victimized through the modification of their content, their images and videos that are already online. And now a lot more modifications and versions of their abuse are floating around online. And online child abuse material, of course, has a whole, it's linked to physical abuse. It has a whole different set of psychological, mental and physical trauma and effects on children, whether or not they've been physically abused. And finally, I am also going to note that adults aren't exempt from this trend, because now we have the possibility, the AI capability to de-age images. So here I'll just show an example of a de-aging tool used to create AI generated child sexual abuse material. So this could happen on any picture nowadays. And a note on video generation, finally. It's still in its infancy, but also just like generative AI's images are in its infancy, and still carries the same concerns that I just mentioned, because law enforcement has already seen the first AI child abuse videos in circulation, and this technology is only expected to increase in quality very, very fast. So part of that speed is a growing culture of support. So AI chatbots, for instance, can help perpetrators act as children if they're pretending to be a child for grooming purposes and want to speak like they do. Generative AI chatbots have also been shown to engage in sexually explicit chats, acting as children might. And they have been seen to generate guides, tutorials, and even suggestions on how to sexually abuse children if they're prompted. So law enforcement has noted that the rapid development of AI-generated chatbots is very much fueled by this supportive nature of the perpetrator community, in the same way that using chatbots has the potential to encourage or normalize this harmful behavior further among those with a sexual interest in children. These tutorials and guides also fuel an uptake in offenders, as it becomes increasingly easy to use generative AI tools, and they become increasingly realistic. So a full 90% of images that were assessed by IWF analysts were realistic enough to be classified under the same law as real child abuse. This happened in the UK. So of those images, a high proportion involved the most severe category of child abuse. And this indicates that perpetrators are experiencing more success generating quite complex, hardcore scenarios. And this could be done using, for instance, a general model that's very good at generating images in general. And then you can refine it specifically on images of children, which happens, for instance, for known victims, a child that the perpetrator knows, and also for famous children. And then you can further sell those refined models, so other perpetrators do not even need to look at tutorials or build that much technical AI expertise. They can just buy these pre-made models, which again lowers the barriers to entry. And just a note on the legal aspect here, if any of you are interested. Models that are specifically refined for illegal purposes, like child sexual abuse material, are not yet illegal in most countries, even if the images they produce are. And this is just because the technology is so new, its use was unforeseen, that laws still have some catching up to do. So on to the last trend that I will cover, which are Nudify apps. They're also tied to lowering barriers for entry. So these apps enable the user to take a regular clothed photo of a peer or themselves and use AI to create a fake nude image. Easily downloadable apps like these mean that law enforcement is not just dealing with adult offenders, but also young people themselves. So this again adds to their workload and to the complexity of these cases. So you can see here news shocking Spain, just like Chitra mentioned, in Australia, India, the US. This is happening in all parts of the world. So in this particular case, schoolboys were sharing unified images of 28 girls in their school who knew nothing about it until they saw these images, and then they had to convince their parents and their teachers that they had not, in fact, engaged in the sexual activities that the boys were creating and sharing. And the police were also reluctant to charge these young boys with such a serious crime because they were young as well. They're children themselves who didn't know the gravity of what they were doing. But of course, the girls were traumatized, and even their community was traumatized, and all of this through purely AI-generated child sexual abuse material. In turn, Nudify apps facilitate sexually coerced extortion, or sextortion as it's called, which is a type of blackmail where someone tries to use intimate, naked, or sexual photos of a person to blackmail them, often for either more images, like real nude images, or for money. And now they don't even need a real photo. They can create one off any image through a Nudify app or an AI model, and they can threaten to share it with the child's parents, teachers, or fellow students, as was the case in Spain here, saying, look, no one will believe it isn't you. And it may be just as effective. So I'm noting the link to AI here because, as I said at the beginning, it's not the issue of child abuse that's new, it's the scale of the problem that AI is exacerbating. So that's the new element, which you can see because extortion cases have risen alarmingly by at least 463% over the course of 1 year. Now, before I come to the conclusion, I would like to address a question which a lot of people have, namely, isn't child abuse material generated by AI better than quote unquote real child abuse imagery? And this comes up so often that I have to emphasize that this is not a victimless crime because one, real children's images are used, so those real children are involved and traumatized. Two, real abuse material is recycled, so that re-victimizes existing victims. And all of this, especially the enormous amount of material being generated, just adds to the workload of overburdened law enforcement, which hinders the investigations of real victims for whom time is a crucial element. And this also strains the well-being, mental and physical, of law enforcement officers. And that's a whole other can of worms, which I won't get into, about turnover rate and within child abuse units. Another issue is that having this generated material desensitizes offenders to increasingly violent material, as we saw a trend of generated images being more likely to depict extreme violence. As you see more and more of these images, the more likely you will be to commit a physical offense. And this also increases the number of offenders due to this more easy accessibility and this exact view that generative AI child abuse is harmless, or at least not nearly as harmful as real abuse images. But this just stems from ignorance of how AI images work, how they're created and used, which is full of, it involves real victims and real children. And then a last small note is that the price of child abuse material might also be decreasing as this material becomes more widely available, which is also not great for the victims, as it can result in more victims and more abuse. So this brings me to the end of my presentation, and I've just copied the 4 trends that I've touched upon here. And since it was very brief, again, feel free to scan the QR code to access our more detailed report on both these trends, the legal aspects of these crimes, and recommendations for how to proceed in the future. I will also post the link in the group chat. So yes, that's the end of my presentation. Let me know if you have any questions. Otherwise, you can always reach us via this email. And I think I'm a little bit under time, but I'm sure the organizers won't mind.
Thank you, Emma, for this presentation. I believe 2 points that stood out to me most were like that harms have already been there, but AI is escalating them and escalating them at a huge, huge speed, a speed that's faster than light, I believe, because I've also been researching, as Chitra mentioned, and we've heard and we've seen, and the research that you shared with us is very, very insightful. And thank you so much for doing this. Now, moving on to the next track. As Emma mentioned, that these are the harms that are affecting children, but it's equally important to also look at the solutions that how we can effectively counter them. This leads to the second track of our webinar on the global best practices for combating AI-specific digital harms. In this session, we will focus on strategies to safeguard children online. And to lead this discussion, I'm going to invite Shelly Hingorani, an independent advisor on violence against women and children. Sherry is a senior policy professional and an expert in violence against women and girls with 15 years of experience in Southeast Asia, the United States, and South Asia. She has led policy, advocacy, and research teams in several global NGOs, including We Protect Global Alliance and the Association of Women for Advocacy and Research. With a strong background in technology policy, she has worked closely with national governments and has significant experience advocating in multilateral settings such as United Nations, the European Union, and ASEAN. She has also contributed to initiatives with Open Society Foundations and Save the Children, ensuring a focus on rights of the most marginalized women and children globally. I invite Sherry to the floor, and over to you, Sherry.
Thank you so much, Sakshi. It's a real pleasure to be here. I would also like to echo Emma's thanks to the organizers, Space to Grow and ICMIC for inviting me to this very important conversation. I wanted to start by quickly talking about the background against which we're celebrating Safer Internet Day today. And the background is really the rapid advancements in artificial intelligence, increasing global competition in AI development, and ongoing efforts to establish international safety standards. Sakshi, if you can move on to the next slide. Thank you. My fellow panelists have already made the point that AI is evolving faster than ever, making AI safety one of the most sort of urgent issues of our time. One of the biggest recent developments is the rise of DeepSeek, a new open-weight AI model from China. Unlike closed AI systems, which are controlled by companies with built-in safeguards, open-weight models are freely available for anyone to use, modify, and deploy. Now, of course, this is great for innovation, and I can't stress that enough, but it also raises serious safety concerns. Now, at the same time, AI has become a major area of global competition. We know countries and companies are racing to build more advanced AI systems, with the US, China, and Europe already heavily investing in research, in infrastructure, regulation. What I want to highlight here is that there is no single approach to AI safety. And that's a big challenge that we must deal with and try and address. If different countries are going to apply different standards or no standards at all, it'll create gaps that bad actors will be able to exploit quite easily. Now, this is one of the reasons why global leaders recently came together in Paris for the Paris AI Summit. The summit brought together governments, tech companies, civil society groups to talk about AI governance and safety. One of the biggest themes to emerge from the summit, which concluded yesterday, was transparency. How do we ensure that AI models are developed responsibly and that people can trust the content AI is producing? There were discussions on how to prevent AI-generated misinformation and disinformation, how to build ethical AI systems and create international safety standards that actually work across different countries and jurisdictions. Another major area of focus at the summit was how AI is already shaping critical areas like defense, like infrastructure, like healthcare, like finance, and what it means to strike the right balance between innovation on one side and security on the other. The summit has made one thing clear. AI safety isn't just a technological issue. It's a global challenge that needs an international, collaborative approach. I think if we don't act now, we risk falling behind AI's rapid evolution, and that's a risk that we can definitely not afford to take. And so over the next 10 minutes or so, I want to take you through some promising practices that have emerged over the past few years, practices that can help prevent, detect, and respond to AI-generated harms in a rapidly evolving digital landscape. On to the next slide. Now, the first challenge that I want to challenge or risk that I want to look at is how easily AI models can be manipulated to generate harmful content. I'm not going to describe how this happens because Emma has done such a fantastic and comprehensive job in explaining that to you already. I just want to quickly mention that unlike traditional digital tools, AI systems can be prompted, they can be modified, they can be repurposed to produce highly realistic but frequently misleading and harmful media. This includes everything from deep fakes to AI-generated voice scams, and even other types of synthetic media that fuel online harassment or fraud. Now, without built-in safeguards, these AI models risk being exploited at scale, which is what can make it very difficult to control the spread of AI-generated harm. Now, the best way to address this risk or this challenge is to build a strong safety architecture, one that integrates proactive and protective safeguards into AI models from the very beginning. What does this mean? This means that we need to test AI for vulnerabilities before AI models are even released into the market, right? And this can be done through what is called red team analysis, where security experts attempt to exploit the system to identify weaknesses before bad actors do. It's also really important that we're blocking harmful AI-generated content at the source. And you can do this by using preemptive classifiers, which will automatically detect and prevent abusive prompts from being actioned. It also requires continuous monitoring and enforcement. So we need to ensure that AI-generated content is being constantly reviewed. It should be reviewed for misuse. It needs to be coupled with automated detection and rapid bans on users who attempt to exploit this system. One sort of promising initiative I wanted to highlight for this particular risk is Partnership on AI's Responsible Practices for Synthetic Media. Now, this is a global effort, and you'll remember that I said that dealing with or addressing AI safety-related concerns will require a global effort that is multi-sectoral. This global effort brings together tech companies, it brings together researchers and civil society to establish guidelines for the ethical use of AI-generated content, because AI-generated content is not something that we can wish away. Their work focuses on transparency standards. It focuses on labeling AI-generated media and deploying better detection tools. to help both platforms and users distinguish between real and synthetic media. What they recommend is what is called safety by design, i.e., that we try and embed responsible practices into AI systems from the very start, so that we can reduce the risk that AI poses to the easy generation of harms while still enabling innovation. On to the next slide, please. Great, thank you. The second challenge or risk I want to look at is how difficult it can be to identify AI-generated content, or how difficult it is to distinguish between real or synthetic content. Right now, there is no universal way for users to tell whether an image, a video, or an audio file was created by AI. Now, this has already been exploited by deepfake scams. It's been exploited through AI-generated impersonation frauds, and of course, we've seen widespread spread of synthetic misinformation during elections across the world. Now, without a system to verify the origins of digital content that you're looking at, people and platforms have no reliable way to distinguish between genuine and AI-generated media. And this is creating risks, not just for the integrity of our elections, it's creating risks for journalism, for cybersecurity, for personal safety, for child safety, and so on and so forth. The best way to address this challenge is through two key approaches. The first approach I want to talk about is referred to as provenance metadata, and the second is watermarking. What these tools do is they help track the origins of AI-generated content, and they allow users to verify its authenticity. Now, what does provenance metadata do? It attaches a digital record to AI-generated content. Think of it as a digital fingerprint. So it's embedding information about where, when, and how an image, audio file or video file was created. An example here is that of Adobe's content credentials, which automatically attaches metadata to AI-generated images. It shows you who created the content, when it was made, and whether AI was used or not. So this can allow platforms, journalists, and users to trace content back to its source and easily distinguish between authentic and synthetic media. The second approach I want to quickly highlight here is watermarking. What this does is it adds a label, sometimes it's visible, sometimes not visible, that marks content as being AI generated. Here, there are two examples I want to highlight. In the interest of time, I'm going to focus on one of them. Google's DeepMind synthetic ID technology. What that is doing is it's embedding invisible watermarks into AI-generated images, ensuring that even if the content has been cropped, if it has been edited or compressed in certain ways, the watermark remains detectable. So you can't remove the watermark. Now, this approach is going to help us ensure that AI-generated content can be identified and flagged even after it has been altered, right? And this is really significant because it can make it harder for bad actors to pass off AI-generated content as real. On to the next slide, please. Great, thank you. Now, of course, as AI-generated content is becoming more sophisticated, the biggest concern isn't just about the fact that harmful content is being created. Obviously, that's a really important issue that we've already spent some time discussing. But there's a related issue of how easily this harmful content can be spread. Now, we all know that digital platforms are built for speed, they're built for engagement. meaning that once AI generated misinformation or child sexual abuse material has been uploaded, they can go viral before they can be taken down. So the third challenge or risk that we need to think about addressing is the rapid spread of harmful AI generated content. And it's important to bear in mind that even with watermarking and provenance sort of metadata, bad actors can find ways to exploit platforms to spread deceptive and harmful AI-generated media. And like I said, once a harmful AI enters a platform's ecosystem, it can become really difficult to contain it. And therefore, it's really important that at the platform level, we're thinking of proactive safeguards that can be put in place. You can do this if you're a platform by strengthening your defenses against AI-generated abuse. This means that you need content authentication systems. You will need to use AI for good, use AI-powered moderation to be able to moderate at scale. Because remember, one of the issues I talked about earlier was how easily AI can be used at scale. And you need rapid response mechanisms. So talking about authenticating AI-generated content at the platform level, right? We've talked about it at the content level and talking about it at the platform level now. Now, platforms need to adopt global standards for verifying AI-generated content so that we can ensure that manipulated or synthetic media is being easily flagged, right? Looking at the Coalition for Content Provenance and Authenticity Standard, this automatically labels AI-generated content, and this can help users distinguish between authentic and synthetic media, which can lessen the risk of users being exposed to harmful content online. We can also explore, and platforms should already be making investments in exploring how AI tools can be used for real-time content moderation. Another sort of best practice I want to highlight is how important it is to enhance user reporting, right? We can't just rely on user reporting, but it's important that users, when they do come across harmful media, have an easy way to report, and that there is a rapid response mechanism built into platforms so that once a user is reporting harmful content, it can be quickly actioned. Now, by combining content authentication both at the content level as well as the platform level, real-time detection and proactive enforcement, platforms can definitely reduce risks that are posed by AI-generated content and prevent bad actors from exploiting these technologies to harm. Very quickly, on to the next slide. We know that AI is advancing faster than ever, right? And while technology is rapidly evolving, our legal frameworks are sometimes struggling to keep up. Many of the laws that govern digital content and online safety were written before AI even existed, which can make it really difficult to effectively regulate AI-generated harms. Now, this gap in legislation is leaving individuals, businesses, and society hugely vulnerable to the risks that we have talked about that use AI for generation. Now, the fourth sort of risk that I want to quickly highlight then is the gap between AI advancements and existing legal protections. Now, we know that AI is already being used for harm, but we know that several countries are lacking specific regulations to address AI-generated harm. What we need is to modernize and ensure that our legal protections are future focused so that AI cannot be misused, cannot be used to generate harmful content, and that victims of or victim survivors of AI generated content have easy access to legal protections against AI driven harm. Now, what does it mean to have an AI-focused law that addresses emerging threats? Governments need to develop and update laws that specifically regulate AI-generated content and its potential to harm. One example I want to highlight is the EU AI Act, which is one of the world's first sort of comprehensive regulatory frameworks designed to govern AI systems, and it reduces risk-based rules to ensure that AI is developed and used responsibly. What I like about this particular act is that it's getting to the root of the problem, right? Like it's trying to address that at the developmental level, AI is being developed and its subsequent use is all responsible. The legislation also establishes very clear guidelines for high-risk AI applications. And this is important so that AI tools are not endangering fundamental rights or public safety or child safety. I'm aware that I'm running out of time, so very quickly, I'll just highlight that we also need stronger legal protections for victims of AI-generated harm. So as countries are thinking about how best to regulate the production of AI models, we need to also have laws that explicitly address AI-generated threats, so that victim survivors of AI-generated harms have easy to access legal course. And remember, this is going to go hand in hand with the rapid response mechanisms that I spoke about previously. On to the next slide. The final sort of risk that I want to highlight is how AI is becoming a bigger part of our daily lives. It's sort of shaping the content that we see, the news that we read, even the voices we hear. But as AI tools are becoming more advanced, many people are struggling to recognize AI-generated content, right? And this is what is making them vulnerable to scams, to fraud, to exposure to harmful content. And one problem here is that we don't have widespread AI literacy or digital literacy, right? So we're not teaching people, AI is rapidly evolving, but we're not teaching people how to critically evaluate online content that they're coming across, right? And this is what is creating the fundamental risk that I think we all need to come together to try and address. The risk is to trust, it is to safety, and it is to informed decision making. Now, what can we do to address this risk that we're confronting because of lack of digital literacy? I mean, the easy answer appears to be to have more education available on digital literacy, but this needs to also incorporate emerging technologies like AI, right? One sort of example I want to highlight here is Digital Promises AI Literacy Framework. What this does is, and the reason why I like it, is that it provides educational tools and it provides guidelines for teaching AI literacy across different age groups and skill levels, right? So think about a curriculum on digital literacy. You'll obviously want it to appeal to lots of different types of people who are already sort of exposed to and are referred to as being digital natives, but equally you also want to excuse me, train people who are digital nomads. And the way to do that is to really start having regular conversations on digital safety, on AI, and how to distinguish between real and synthetic media. And in this regard, clear labels and AI transparency notices that I talked about earlier will also help, so that we're not outsourcing the responsibility of distinguishing between real and synthetic media to the users. We also want platforms and those who are using AI models to take some responsibility for labeling content that is generated by AI. Just in terms of final thoughts, and this is on to the last slide, I think I think we've all tried to highlight for you how rapidly AI is advancing, and how it combines incredible opportunities with quite significant risks. Now, we have the tools to detect and mitigate AI-generated harms, but I believe the real goal should be to prevent these harms from happening in the first place. That's why safety by design needs to be at the heart of the AI lifecycle. So, from the moment a model is conceptualized to how it's trained to how it's deployed and monitored over time. Right now, much of the conversation on AI safety is reactive. We talk about detecting AI generated harms after they have spread. We talk about removing AI generated misinformation after it has already gone viral, or responding to fraud after people have already been scammed. But we cannot always afford to play catch up. The best way to ensure that AI remains a force for good is we need to bake safety into every stage of AI development so that risks are being minimized before they reach the public. What this means is that we're integrating safeguards into AI models from the start, that we're ensuring proactive detection of harmful content, that we're building transparency tools like provenance, metadata, and watermarking, and we're making AI literacy a huge priority across countries. By embracing this safety by design approach, we can successfully move from responding to AI risks to actively preventing them. And this is how we can ensure that AI can be trusted and responsible technology can be developed using AI for the future. I'll stop here and give the floor back to Sakshi. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shelly, for sharing with us so many great best practices. And I think two key takeaways from your session that I would like to reiterate are that, AI should be developed and used responsibly. And of course, updating the legal frameworks for ensuring that protection and redressal is met quickly. So thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and the detailed presentation. So moving on, building from this, the best practices that Shelley have already touched upon, we will now move to track 3, where we will focus on the role of law enforcement in mitigating AI-enabled exploitation of children. For this session, we are pleased to welcome 2 speakers who will share their expertise on the role of law enforcement and best practices in mitigating AI-enabled exploitation of children. First, I would like to introduce Aishwarya Prashant Dogre, IPS Deputy Director at the Indian Cybercrime Coordination Center, I4C, Ministry of Home Affairs, Government of India. Aishwarya has been at the forefront of tackling technology-driven crimes, particularly those affecting children. She's a member of Interpol's South Asian Child Trafficking Victim Identification Task Force and has played a key role in strengthening Kerala Police response to online child sexual abuse. Her work also includes pioneering initiatives like Kerala's first cyber simulator room and the Cyber Ambassador Project, which empowers youth leaders as digital safety advocates. She has also represented India at international forums, including the US Department of State's International Visitor Leadership Program on combating human trafficking with technology. Currently, she leads I4C's efforts in addressing online crimes against women and children. Joining shortly after Aishwarya will be Nuno Almeida, Criminal Investigation Officer at Interpol. His introduction will be followed once we have heard from Aishwarya. And now I would like to open the floor to Aishwarya.
Thank you. I'll just share, I'll be sharing my screen. I hope my screen is visible.
Yes,
Yes.
All right. Good afternoon to everybody. It's my privilege to be part of this webinar. A lot of familiar faces, including Shaili, and also I saw Braxwell and Chitra and the team from ICMEC. It is my pleasure to be at this forum to speak about a topic so close to my heart. And it's very pivotal that we are doing this discussion today, where we're not only speaking of Safer Internet Day, but also where the Honorable Prime Minister of India was at the AI summit in France. And in that same context, it reminds me of the Delhi Declaration of 2024, which was made as part of the global partnership on AI, where India played a very critical role in identifying almost 18 to 19 future visions with regard to artificial intelligence. Today, as we speak about AI enabled exploitation of children, the first vision of this Delhi Declaration to 2024 was recognizing the transformational potential of AI. Yes, we did speak about the positive aspect at the summit, but today we're speaking of something which is grave and going to affect the future generations. So I believe today's webinar is a great continuum of how each speaker is going about. So my first slide is actually along the lines of what Emma said, taking in from the Bracket Foundation Generative AI report, where there are a wide range of victims who are part of this entire organized crime that exists. So I wouldn't be reiterating the same, but I would like to emphasize that AI has led to industrializing the scale of sexual abuse against children. And yes, when we speak about industrializing the scale, we are speaking of large, very, very large numbers. Mm. Yep. So, as I go through my presentation, just identifying newer trends in child sexual abuse material. What started as just online child sexual exploitation, from physical abuse being video shot and uploaded onto the internet, we gradually saw it moving towards online grooming. A recent draft report of the financial FATF, the Financial Action Task Force, focused on serial number 3 and 4 that you see on your screen. That is live streaming sexual abuse of children and financial sextortion of children. So these two have actually been a critical point where commercial sexual exploitation of children has actually led to the booming of the market for consumption of CSAM. We've also seen sexually explicit chats with minors, speaking about minors, which are in the forefront. And of course, what we've been speaking about since the past 1 hour about nudifying imagery and also generative AI. Um, Most of the pictures that you see on the screen are all created using AI. And the first photo that you see on the left, it just says, I want a photo that shows a child who is using digital media. That's the first image that cropped up on AI for me. The second, I want a scared and a sad photo of a child using digital media. And that was like within milliseconds, I got the second photo. And this is what I am saying of how emotions, how imagery is here to change how we see the digital space, especially concerning the most vulnerable section of our society, our children. So from the law enforcement side, as I speak as a police officer before this forum, a certain number of trend analysis that I have personally seen and also based on my research on a couple of online platforms. I'm just going to focus on quickly through these 9 areas which I have identified. One is use of chat rooms by perpetrators in P2P platforms for discussing how to avoid detection. So a lot of these chat rooms are continuously being used by perpetrators to discuss how best can tools be developed, how best can softwares be developed to make CSAM content generated using AI, but to prevent detection. So as Shaili very clearly said, like there should be watermark and there should be there should be like a digital footprint to it. But then there are perpetrators who are discussing how to evolve technology to avoid this. Number two is, of course, Stable Diffusion AI being a path breaker in perpetuating AI CCM. And in the report that Emma has shared in the chat, the Stable Diffusion AI has been discussed in length by the Brackett Foundation report. So I would encourage everybody to read about it. Number three is the rise of CSAM is also at least partially due to young people's behavior online. So that propagates children, that propagates youngsters for self-generation of AI. So I had the opportunity of being in the US last year and working in the space with the law enforcement in the US. And a very critical point that emerged as a trend in the US is a very close link between human trafficking, sexual abuse material online, and drug trafficking. So the youngsters in this whole need of wanting drugs are actually coerced into sending photos, content, which is exploitative, which is sexual in nature, in order to procure uh, procure drugs. So it becomes a vicious cycle. So it's the entire digital space, or the attitude and the setup of youngsters is actually encouraging them to also create self-generated AI, which could be CSAM. Social media platforms being the trade routes for AI CSAM. According to some of the discussions that I have had with some victims and survivors, almost 125% have said that AI CSAM has been spread. I don't say create, it has been spread through Instagram and Facebook and many platforms of this sort, which are used in common parlance. Uh, Number five is using crypto, PayPal for AI CSAM trade, creation, and usage. So we need to understand the financial implications as well of CSAM generation, CSAM movement in the digital space. Of course, there is the existence of repeated offenders who are continuously creating content, sharing content, selling content. Number seven is extensive AI CSAM advertisements on the internet. So there are a lot of commercial sex advertisements that are available, which at the click of a button, you are able to access AI CSAM material. As per research, it is within 3 clicks that you can access CSAM material on the internet. Number eight is something we are definitely grappling with, is data inconsistencies. Of course, data is fragmented, it is inaccessible, underutilized, and of course, distrust in sharing across platforms and organizations and stakeholders. Serial number nine is focus is on supply. That is, we are focusing on preventing victimization. There is a need to shift focus on attacking the demand of CSAM and AI CSAM. For my friends online, I would like to clarify why I have written this as CCSEM, is because the NHRC has actually clearly said that we do not use the word child pornography and replace it with child sexual exploitative and abusive material. So it's not a spelling error, just for clarification. Shaili very clearly stated that legal provisions have to yet evolve. But yes, in the Indian context, we have the IT Act, as well as the POCSO Act, the Protection of Children Against Sexual Offences Act, which overtly, covertly does speak about taking action against any kind of content which is depicting children in obscene sense. So it could be any kind of action which is being even simulated using AI, which could be held liable under the Indian context. But yes, we do not have Indian specific laws specifically focusing on AI CSAM, but when you read within the lines, we are well within the purview to take legal action. Speaking of the role played by the Indian Cybercrime Coordination Center, we have the National Cybercrime Reporting Portal. The I4C was initially set up with the main agenda of addressing crimes against women and children, for which we had the NCRP portal. This particular portal is now in the process of a completely new architectural design where we are encouraging enhanced reporting. As very rightly said by the previous speakers, there is a need to report. It's not just the victims. There are a lot of third-party stakeholders, a lot of social organizations who would like to report to us. So yes, we are including that in our NCRP portal. We also aim to create a database. So a database of repeated offenders, a database of a hash registry, which will enable prevention of re-victimization of children, which happens. I'm sure many of you all know that most of the content that is available on the internet is on victims who are continuously being the star children or the star victims or the favorite children of the internet, and their videos are continuously being shared. So if we have a hash registry, if we see that this has already been highlighted, we aim to take action on pulling it down immediately. When I speak of pulling and taking down of content, we have something known as the Sahyog portal, which is going to be integrated into the NCRP. It is going to basically enable immediate takedown of such obscene content as reported by the competent authorities. This takedown is to be done by the social media intermediaries, and it is very crucial because as we understand that whenever we are working on AI CSAM, the basics of AI is it requires a training data set. The more the content is available on the online space, the more better does the tool or the AI software develop, right? So we are aiming at timely pulling down of content so that re-victimization doesn't happen by making more data available for training data sets. I4C has also worked with CDAC. CDAC is one of our Center for Development on Advanced Computing. It's called the Proactive Monitoring Tool. This Proactive Monitoring Tool, it basically identifies the surface web for any kind of CSAM, and we're working on making it to also identify AI-based content available on the surface web and then segregate the data. So we get a lot of CSAM content also coming in reporting to India through NICMEC. So a lot of cyber tip line reports that come to I4C using the PMT tool, we segregate into yes CSAM, no CSAM, and then yes CSAM is then pushed to the law enforcement agencies at the state level for taking more timely action. This is basically to ensure better efficiency. In I4C, we also have something known as the threat analytics team. So this team is yet in the process of evolution, but we are aiming at providing vulnerability assessment reports of applications which are being used by children or being targeting children, where there requires a certain change in their policies, a certain way in which their application is to ensure that it is more children friendly on the digital space. Coordinating with social media intermediaries is extremely crucial. We basically focus with intermediaries, requesting them, directing them for safety by design propagation, which Shaili has already spoken about. Of course, deepfake is a very important parallel when we speak about artificial intelligence. So I4C is part of the consultative committee on deepfakes, and how should our response be when we are looking at deepfake related content is what we are working on. And most crucially, data analytics, which I already said is a trend where data is completely segregated. Data analytics based on NCRP complaints that we receive and the NICMEC reporting that we get. We are trying to identify some common trends, common patterns. So we're trying to find hotspots where such content is created. We're trying to find hotspots where there is repeated offenders or repeated victims coming into force. So through data analytics, we are working on that. Of course, challenges and the way forward is something I would like to focus on for the next 2 minutes. Number one is there is a requirement for dedicated center and dedicated attention in combating CSAM. Any kind of dedicated attention in protecting especially our vulnerable children is extremely crucial. Some states in India like Kerala, Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, Punjab, these are some states that have dedicated centers with dedicated officers working just in the space of child sexual abuse prevention. But then this has to actually spread throughout the country so that more focused attention could be brought in. Number two, we use a number of AI detecting tools, but these tools have to stand true in the court of law. So we need to develop forensic capabilities and then get them to be standardized by the National Forensic Science University. This standardization is extremely crucial because it not only puts in the green tick to your investigation, but it also helps in the prosecution, which enables conviction and consequently stringent action on demand of CSAM, which I actually focused on. Number three is caregiver roles. There is a very beautiful campaign that was started by Assam Police. Hashtag No to Sharenting. It is basically telling parents you should not share pictures of your children because that could affect their safety. So if I have time, I will just show one or two posts that Assam Police has shared. It's a brilliant campaign and which is focusing on how happy, like good photos of their children, innocuous images of their children can be converted using AI to content which is abusive and exploitative. Number four, international cooperation along with along with the conferences our senior officers in the central government are attending. The way forward would definitely be focused on the UN Convention Against Cybercrime. If I'm not mistaken, section 14, 15, 16 of the convention speaks about CSAM and also has hints about AI-based CSAM. Of course, it has not been overtly mentioned about artificial intelligence, but it is definitely a way forward on bringing in all stakeholders in combating cybercrime. Coming to my fifth point, coordinating across stakeholders, it is crucial for protecting the star children to prevent re-victimization. This is a reiteration of the point of maintaining a hash database. Like say, for example, one social media platform flags some content stating this is AI CSAM, but that same content of a star child is available on platform number 2, and that is not flagged. We again go back to we get back to the starting point leading to re-victimization. So if there is a sharing of hashes, it will be very crucial in preventing re-victimization. Of course, focusing on legislations and policies to be further attuned to emerging AI-based trends is extremely crucial. And of course, the most important is capacity building of law enforcement agencies, with the basics being real CSAM versus AI CSAM. We started this entire session in a very beautiful manner where we were made to question, is AI CSAM as bad as real CSAM? So that kind of attuning, that kind of sensitization of law enforcement officers is extremely crucial, that our fight against CSAM has to be very holistic. So thank you. That's my short presentation on behalf of the Indian Cybercrime Coordination Center. You can reach me out on the email ID that's provided on your screen. Thank you.
Thank you, Aishwarya, for a very informative presentation and your insights on AI-related harms and the complex linkages of CSAM, human trafficking, and drug trafficking, and the efforts that you've mentioned that I4C is currently undertaking on taking down harmful content to prevent re-victimization is a huge step towards this fight against protecting children in the AI-related harm landscape. Thank you so much. Now, moving forward, I would like to invite the second speaker, Nuno Almeida, who is the Criminal Investigation Officer at Interpol. Nuno has a unique combination of academic and professional expertise, holding master's degree in both clinical psychology and international and European law. As a criminal intelligence officer in Interpol's Crime Against Children unit, Nuno uses his diverse skill set to lead effective international investigations. His knowledge of human behavior is complemented by his technical skills and a white hat mindset, enabling him to coordinate and lead complex investigations of cyber-enabled or facilitated crimes. He's also the coordinator of the Interpol DevOps group that brings together operational developers and law enforcement specialists to co-create cutting-edge tools that help identify, locate, and investigate victims and offenders faster. So I would like to invite Nuno to share his perspective on the topic that we've been talking about, and over to you, Nuno.
Thank you very much. Let me share my screen. If you can just give me a thumbs up if you can see it. Yeah, thank you very much. Well, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are. My name is Nuno. I work in the Crimes Against Children unit. Thank you very much for the invite. It was actually hard to put this presentation together. It's a challenging topic, and I really appreciate the opportunity to discuss this. It makes it even harder after so many good speakers and so many interesting ideas that have been floated. But I'll do my best. I think we're a bit short on time, so I'll keep my presentation short. Open to discuss any and to answer any questions you might have at the end. I was also asked to do a brief presentation of Interpol and what we do. So I'm going to go quickly to who we are and what we're trying to achieve. So Interpol is a global structure, meaning that we are spread out all over the world, meaning that the headquarters are in Lyon, in France, is where I sit today. But we have regional officers and representatives all over the world. Our saying is that Interpol never sleeps, we follow the sun. So when Interpol in Lyon goes to sleep, the Interpol complex in Singapore takes over. And like this, there's a 24/7. If you need to contact Interpol, it will always be there, someone to answer your questions. We are 196 member countries connected through a secure network called I-24/7. This network allows for many things, but I think the most important of all is that anyone in the world can reach anyone else in the world through us. So if you are in Brazil and tomorrow you need to connect with someone in Palau, you can just reach out to the I-24/7 network. Palau will have, Brasilia has an NCB, a National Central Bureau of Interpol. Palau has a National Central Bureau of Interpol. They can talk to each other very quickly. So this is how we gap this sometimes challenge communications and having contact points all over the world. This is a secure communications network. It also allows to share personal data, criminal data, police data. So countries can cooperate on international investigations, and this is extremely useful for our day-to-day. We do some things, and other things are out of scope of what Interpol does. According to our Article 3 of our Constitution, it basically says that we're not allowed to do anything that relates to religious, military, racial, or political crimes. So all those are out of scope. So what is in scope are those four programs that you have on the screen. We have cybercrime, of course, is one of the most important nowadays. It sits mostly in Singapore and has our cybercrime directorate. We also have a directorate on counterterrorism, a directorate on financial crime and corruption, and we have organized and emerging crime. And here is where the Crimes Against Children unit sits. It's under the Vulnerable Communities Subdirectorate, which has two twin sisters units, which is basically trafficking human beings and crimes against children. Just a few numbers on our databases, not going to go through all of it. Just basically, just for you to know, we have 19 databases. There's millions of requests, billions of requests a year, hundreds of requests per second. It's something that, if you're not aware, you should be aware of, and you should know more and try to use them. Probably what is most known, Interpol most known for, is the red notices. We don't have only red notices, we have a bunch of them. Red notices to identify and arrest someone that is being searched for an international arrest warrant. But we have, especially in the Crimes Against Children unit, we use two other Yellow notice for missing persons, including children. Green notice is very used for also warnings and intelligence. So for example, if someone has been convicted of a crime, child sexual abuse, or for traveling to abuse children in other areas of the world, even if this person already did their sentence, you can have a green notice on this person. So when they travel to a country and you pass the passport on the systems and you consult Interpol's databases, you can see, okay, this person in the past has been arrested for traveling and committing crimes against children. Like, do you want this person to come in? It's just information, but it's there. One that I would also make a mention in here is purple notice, is about modus operandi, especially in the time of AI. This is something that I would also encourage countries to use. So if there's a new trend in AI abuse, especially in using it against children and to offend against children, this is something that you can put up as a purple notice. So other countries will be aware that a new trend is on the rise and that they should be doing something about it. Going more into the CAC unit and who we are, this is basically at the moment we are 18 people of all these nationalities, which means that there's a bunch of languages that are spoken. This is very useful for victim identification purpose, for coordinating operations internationally, for providing support. So this is the thing that we do. I'll go into each one of them. So building capacity. Our interpretation of building capacity is not doing presentations. It's actually going to the countries and supporting countries and doing their operations and building their specialized units. So the Interpol's General Assembly, they have passed a resolution 2 years ago where it says that every country should have a specialized unit to fight crimes against children. So all those 196 countries that are part of Interpol, they should have specialized units. One thing that the Crimes Against Children unit does is go to the countries and help them to set up these units. Prevention is extremely important and we take it very seriously. We have Interpol's worst off list. For example, we've heard here before that having a lot of CSAM available on the ClearNet is something that is not desirable. And this is what IWAL tries to do. We try to take down notices of websites that depict child abuse and take them down as fast as we can. We have a specialist group on crimes against children, which is basically a community group that comes together once a year and tries to discuss best practices on how, for example, how to do offender management, how to do victim identification, or how to handle internet facilitated crimes. Technology. This is the part where I mostly sit, is the TechOps team. We have a group called the Interpol DevOps Group. I'll talk more about it later in the presentation, so I'm not going to go in here. For example, we have ICSA, the International Child Sexual Exploitation Database. It's a very known database. Most of you will know about. I'll present some numbers on it. But basically today we are working on the next generation of this database and how we can integrate technologies to make this database better. We have a whole team of analysis where we take the data that we have, we do reporting, we do intelligence reports, we spread like the purple notices. We also do those kinds of reports to our member countries, and we do a lot of analysis on the green notice that I mentioned before. We do also have a bit of a component on research. For example, there's currently a program called Disrupting Harm that is going to the countries, trying to understand the dimension of the problem in each of the countries, what is the preparedness of the countries to handle online child sexual exploitation, for example. We do have some, for example, forms of policy and advocacy. So recently there's a UN Convention on Cybercrime. Interpol is mentioned there. In this, we gave our technical opinion to the regulations. But most importantly, I would say what is the most important part of our job is the operational part, where we do actually victim identification, most of it in the ICSA database, but not only. We also help countries. We also do victim identification task forces all over the world. We do operational coordination. So I coordinate some international operations that tackle online child sexual exploitation. We offer operational support, so we can, if a country needs support in whatever type of support they need, we can travel to the country and help them with their operations on site. We facilitate information sharing through the I-24/7 network, through the ICSA database, and we do incident response. It's not very common to the incident response, but it's one of the services that we provide. Just one brief word on ICSA. Some of the numbers, 72 countries are connected. It's very good, but not enough. We are 196 countries are part of Interpol. We would love to have those 196 countries connected to ICSA. On average, 31 victims identified every day. More than 40,000 victims have been identified since ICSA exists, more than 20,000 offenders. I think these numbers talk for themselves. These numbers from February. If this doesn't convince a country to be connected to ICSA, they should. And also there have been some mentions to deconfliction and having hashes being shared. We'll talk about that a little bit after, but ICSA is a great place to do it. So the topic itself, since I spent 10 minutes presenting Interpol, I have now 5 minutes to talk about this topic. Because it's a hard topic, I'm happy I only have 5 minutes to talk about that. What is the role of law enforcement and best practices in mitigating AI-enabled exploitation of children? It's extremely hard, and I'm going to go through 4 things that I think are the most important ones. I'm not super convinced these are the only ones that should be addressed, but it's a very fast evolving space, and it's very hard to keep up, especially when, and this has been mentioned here before, when legislation falls behind. So law enforcement enforces legislation. If legislation falls behind, we're going to be behind. But there are some things we can do to keep up to date with what's out there. To start with the truth of La Police. So of course, one of the roles of law enforcement is to investigate. And so should investigate AI-enabled facilitated crimes. It's no brainer as a responsibility that law enforcement has. But I think more important than just doing that is to make sure that this type of crime is not deprioritized. For example, we see often images that are known from the ICSA database. There are victims that have been identified, and they have changed the faces through in painting, so through techniques of AI, and they put now kids that, and these faces are taken, for example, from Instagram. So kids that haven't been abused per se, but now there's CSAM with their faces on them. So now they're victims of them. There is sometimes a tendency, because these crimes are very hard to investigate, they're very hard to prosecute if the correct laws are not in place, and most of the times they're not. There is a tendency to deprioritize. The kid hasn't been abused, there's no hands-on abuse, so maybe we're not going to put all our efforts into investigating this, because these are efforts that are not going into cases of hands-on abuse. This argument is understandable, and it also speaks to the lack of resources that many times law enforcement faces, but it is something that we should keep in mind, that yes, hands-on abuse probably should be prioritized above everything, but it doesn't mean that we shouldn't investigate at all the AI facilitated or enabled crimes. So a role of law enforcement is to make sure that by looking into these crimes and making sure that some of them, or at least the worst type of offending, is investigated and prosecuted, it passes on a message also to society and to offenders and potential offenders. Training and education, this is one that I think is very important as well, because this is a very fast evolving space. We need to make sure that we have specialized officers that can investigate and know how to investigate this type of crimes, that are trained on the detection of AI-generated content, that are aware that there are tools out there that allow them to do these detections. For example, I've heard here a few times throughout this webinar that it's not possible, and that's not really true. It is hard, it is challenging, there are some caveats to it, but it is possible to identify material that has been AI generated, created, or manipulated. And so it shows that we should do more training on this, and to make sure that the training curricula keeps being updated, and that the people being trained are having refresh and recycling courses as soon as possible, as new things, as new knowledge is out there. Prevention, so public awareness, this has been spoken here a few times as well, but I think law enforcement have a specific duty to inform the public of what is out there, why as a parent you shouldn't share pictures of your children naked on the beaches, or just share the pictures, period. And also inform policymakers. I think police is many times consulted by parliaments or by lawmakers, and I think it's our duty to be, one, aware of the latest trends, do analysis on the data that we have, but also to make sure that the information we pass on is as accurate as possible, and that the new laws are going to have the biggest impact possible, and allow law enforcement, and going back to point number one on investigation and enforcement, that allows law enforcement to investigate and do prosecution properly. And finally, collaboration. Engage with the international community. This webinar is one example of it. But for example, we should also engage more with the private sector and NGOs. A lot of these technologies are being put out there with the private sector. I think there's a big responsibility on the private sector to create AI or create whatever technologies with safety first, safety in mind, child safety in mind. So this is extremely important, but it's also important that law enforcement passes on the information on how these technologies are being abused to the private sector. Because if they are not aware, that you can do, I heard here as well, you can do all the red teaming that you want, but offenders are very creative. So I think it's also very good to inform private sector, to inform these red teams that try to contour the AI models. How are they being abused so that they can be built up with guardrails for this? So these, for me, are the most important ones. As I said at the beginning, I don't think they are the only ones available, but I'll just like to plug one more thing here on the collaboration aspect. I said at the beginning that I coordinate one of our groups, which is the Interpol DevOps group. Basically, this is a group that brings together law enforcement and AI specialists, software program developers, who have data scientists. Everyone comes together for 1 week. We do this twice a year, and we try to develop tools to help investigators fighting crimes against children faster and better. So in here, we have dedicated quite a lot of time to being able to detect AI-generated material, to how can we use AI in favor of investigations, because we usually talk about AI on how AI is misused and abused by offenders, but we don't talk often how AI can be used in favor of investigators, in favor of law enforcement. This is what we try to do in this group. I'll just put here some of the hackathons that we have done in the past already. Next week is going to be one in Cyprus. In March, there's going to be another one in the US. This is a very active group. We have more than active developers that even between hackathons, they keep on developing. We have over 200 projects, and quite a few of those are on AI. We have recently put out some tools that are free for law enforcement. This is the purpose of DevOps, to help fight some of the issues that we discussed here today. So sorry, I went a bit over time. Thank you very much for your attention. Happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you so much, Nuno, for that really, really comprehensive presentation and the added sense of humor to ensure that you're able to focus on the subject as well. So thank you so much. I think some of the key things that you've highlighted, especially on the entire process of victim identification and doing the operations and enabling other countries in terms of facilitating investigation on cybercrimes against children. I think these are really important and somewhat really fascinating as well. So thank you so much for your time and sharing that. With that, we come to the close of what the speakers had to say and share through this presentation. I would request if all the panelists can come on, video, so that, there are a few questions that we have from the participants. I'm just going to pose those questions, and please feel free, either of you who would want to pick up that question and answer. Um, Thank you so much. So, one of the questions from the participants is, the entire thing that I think, Emma, you mentioned specifically on one of the parts where you said the desensitization of violence, and, something like that becoming like probably a new normal is quite scary, and how do you really look at using AI for a mass digital literacy vis-a-vis actually desensitizing what the harms that it is creating? So what can be done to really look at using AI for literacy in terms of harms, rather than actually that doing the real opposite? What can be done?
Thank you for the question. Yes, it is very shocking. And like I said, well, actually, this is what one of the law enforcement officers said, is to combat bad AI, the best way is to have good AI. So there are some examples which I've heard of, which, for instance, in the UK, I believe it's called the Stop It Now campaign. So again, it's just digital literacy, AI literacy. So apparently they worked with Pornhub, for instance, and when users started typing in a search prompt that had anything to do with children, there was a notice that popped up, and you can use like text detection of certain keywords, and then you just get a notice that popped up. You are searching an illegal term, or you might see illegal content, and then have a link to a helpline. So that's just one example of how AI can be used for good, because then you don't have to have it's way too much information for any individual to go through. But this is just one way that AI can just quickly send a pop-up and not just warn people, but also provide a helpline.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And I think it also leads to what, Shelley, when you were speaking, you mentioned about how there has to be easy reporting and redressal attached to the entire process of a platform. And I quite like what, while we are speaking in this entire forum, we are talking about making platforms more accountable on, identifying AI versus a non-AI image, and not really making the users accountable for it. So one another question which is linked to this is to say that, if there are global best practices, and which, Shelley, you really mentioned about quite a few. And we also know that though these are great practices, we don't have that being integrated into, say, other countries and other nations where we know that the trends and the harms are very similar. What can we do as organizations together working on a very significant issue such as this, to make best practices really integrate into different cultural contexts, because the harms are not really different?
Yeah, no, thank you for that question. I think it is really important that we come together with stakeholders from different sort of countries, discuss and exchange best practices. And you're absolutely right in pointing out that certain practices may be really successful in one context, but they don't easily translate into another political, socioeconomic context. So it's really important that any discussion that we have on how to create a global consensus on what it means to address AI-generated child sexual abuse material, for instance, or AI-generated harms, more generally speaking, we are representing the voices of the global majority, that these conversations are not just focused on countries that have more sort of resources and resources that have been invested in AI sort of development, because it's not just about the development of technology that one is trying to regulate, it's also its use. And several panelists today talked about the international or global sort of nature of the problem, how it is easy for, I believe it was Pilar who said, how it's easy for a perpetrator sort of based in Nigeria to use a photograph of a child from India and feed it into an AI model that was developed somewhere in the US to generate AI sort of generated child sexual abuse material. So we really need to expand our understanding and let go of some of the blinkers that we have when it comes to thinking about our sort of country or our region being the only one that's trying to address this hugely complex and multifaceted problem. Chitra, I think you need to unmute yourself.
Sorry. I was saying that the most important thing being really deeply understanding the issue at large to be able to contextualize best practices, and having that approach is extremely critical. There are a few more questions, and I think one of them, it'll be great if you could take this one, especially on victim identification. Are you there? Yeah, you're there. Great. So one of the questions, and this is a trend that we're seeing here in India, where there is something like a digital arrest that is happening, on a call. There are scammers, not just looking at children, but also adults, where they are basically scamming you by saying that, we found a parcel which has some drugs, or there is something that is there, and they put you on a call throughout, and they make sure that for the next 4 or 5 hours your phone and everything is accessible to them, and they're either it's a financial scam at this point in time, but definitely these are also linked to child sexual abuse and exploitation. So in most of these cases internationally, or probably whether because you have exposure to the crimes that are happening across the world, what is the first step that a victim can take, or what is the right of a victim when they are facing crimes in the online space, whether it is AI driven or digital crimes?
It's a hard question because it's going to depend very much on the jurisdictions and what's happening. But I think first advice, because many times these crimes go underreported. So many times victims don't come forward because either it's something that they think, oh, it's not going to take me anywhere because police is not going to do anything, or there's nothing that I should, or I don't want to know about this, so I want to forget that this happened to me. The problem with this is it's an understandable from the victim perspective that they might just want to put this behind them, but from the law enforcement perspective and the policy making, underreported crime is a crime that is not addressed. So I think definitely there are report the crime to the police, one of the first things to do. Then I don't know if I understood correctly. Are there images being created from these kids that are then being circulated? That's what you said.
Yes.
Yeah. So then there is some, for example, NECMEC has a portal where you can upload an image. Everything is done locally on your web browser. And if, for example, there is an image of yourself that has been nudified, or even a real image of you naked as a kid or as an adult, but this is mostly for kids, you can upload it there. The system will hash that image and then will report it to the internet service providers or the electronic service providers for them to detect this as content that is illegal and should be taken down. So one, for them to know that it's not their fault for sure. Second, that police is there to help, and that there are a lot of organizations that are putting a lot of efforts to make sure that these images are being taken down as fast as they can. And yeah, I think this would be the advice. However, this is again putting the burden on the victims. I think ideally the platforms would be able to detect these things, like Emma was saying. I think platforms should be doing more in terms of using AI to detect this content, because now hashes are very important. The use of hash-based technology to detect things that are known is incredible. But to detect things that haven't been seen before, and now with AI, it's so easy to detect, to create new stuff that hasn't been created. Definitely, we need to use AI for that. So let's use AI for good. These companies should be creating the AI technologies that whenever new images have been put in there, they can detect it as an illegal content, take it down, don't let it being shared, don't let it being moved forward. I think that would be the ideal scenario.
Great, thank you so much for that. And I think one of the most important thing that you mentioned is the NCMEC and being able to really take down, CSAM material, or even if it's adult images. And I think Aishwarya is not there, but then in India, you have the Sahyog portal, which has been created now, which is getting integrated into the system to be able to do that exact thing of doing a takedown of CSAM material. So I think it's really important that, not the portals which are there in different countries are able to really work together to be able to identify offenders and images cutting across what's happening globally. So thank you for that. There's just one last question that we would be able to take for now, and I think one of the things is basically, I think again, both Emma, Shelley, you had mentioned about these things, and I think one of the things is that EU has come up with an act on AI and criminalizing AI content, which is getting generated, which is CSAM. I think one of the questions is, what is the advancement in law that is happening in AI? Of course, EU is just the first example we have, but which are the countries, or where is that advancement really happening? Because without that, I think we'll never be able to take care of victims, and the crimes is just going to happen, because it's like the entire thing of playing the catch up. Please feel free to take that. So, and I was just saying, please feel free to take that as the last question, and I would love to hear all of you to give your comments on that.
On the legislation, of course, like Nuno said, it's a very broad topic, so it very much depends on each country. The EU AI Act is the most comprehensive act that specifically focuses on AI. And it takes a risk-based approach. So types of applications that are riskier will have more processes to go through to ensure safety by design. But related specifically to child abuse, this varies by country. So some countries that we've talked to, for instance, say actually it isn't a problem because their legislation covers any images, any cartoons or depictions of illegal material, and that covers generative AI content, whereas other countries have a huge issue here because their legislation doesn't encompass fake material. If it's not a real child, it might not be illegal. So again, I think I'll post in the group. There are some resources. For instance, InHope has a global CSAM legislative overview, and the IPP has also global AI law and policy tracker. So if you want to look up these legislative documents specific to your country, it should be possible.
Perfect. No, thank you so much. Shelley, would you like to add some points
just
to this?
to build on what Emma was saying and to mention a specific example, the United Kingdom is strengthening its legal framework to combat AI-generated child sexual abuse material in particular, and it's doing this through measures in the forthcoming Crime and Policing Bill. Now, in the UK, important to understand that it was already illegal to possess or to create AI-generated CSAM. What this new bill is proposing to do is to introduce an additional offense that specifically targets AI models that have been specifically optimized to generate the
Mhm.
most severe forms of child sexual abuse material. Now, what this means is that it's going beyond penalizing those who create or distribute CSAM. It's now criminalizing the development and possession of AI tools that can be fine-tuned to generate such material. The bill is also introducing a new criminal offense for possessing AI-generated quote-unquote pedophile manuals, which I believe Aishwarya referred to, which provides guidance on using AI for CSAM production. I'm happy to post a link to this new piece of legislation for those who are interested, but I just thought that that is an interesting innovation in terms of legislative development that our audiences might be interested in.
Great. Would be great if you can share. And thank you so much. And I think we're ending on a note that, yes, there are harms, there are risks, but I think it's just the intent. And if we have the intent, we can make sure that the tools and what is getting created can be for good and not to really harm children or harm, people who are using it. So I think we're ending on a note that there is an act and there is an example and a best practice out there, and it's about how we really are able to use that across various countries. So with that, I think I want to thank each one of you, the speakers. Really informative, and most of the time it was like, you're just hooked on to just listening because you want to know more. So it really helped. So thank you so much, Shelly, Aishwarya, Emma. It was really an amazing conversation that we've had. I also want to thank, ICMEC and the entire team, including Pilar, Bramwell, and the Space to Grow team for actually putting this together and really working on this. Some of the key takeaways that we have are, one, of course, using AI for good and really looking at how to combat harms against children through literacy of AI, not just by depending on law enforcement, but to create awareness across stakeholders. Second, being that AI and the constant generation of violent materials can actually make it a desensitization and have the risk of having this becoming a new normal. And how do we really prevent that? And I think that's a huge takeaway in terms of making sure that the new normal is AI for good and not AI being desensitized in terms of violence. The other thing that really came across through all the speakers, what they have said is a collaborative approach. We talk about collaboration and not just making that as just a word, but then to really mean collaboration and looking at bringing best practices together and looking at reintegrating that into different settings, different cultural contexts, and experimenting that is something which is extremely important. And finally, I would want to say one little thing that what is also saying, that do not deprioritize this. And I think it's a very important messaging, that continue investigation, continue to report, continue to have redressal. That's when we learn to know how to mitigate this, and never deprioritize this, because children are really important, and working with children and ensuring that they're not harmed is extremely critical. So with that, thank you so much, everyone. We will be publishing a white paper based on this webinar, and we will definitely share it with all of you, and look forward to having much more engaging conversations and actions towards this very important issue. Have a great day, evening, and yeah, thank you. Bye-bye.